Hey guys, so in this tutorial what we're going to do is we're just going to start our project. So this is going to be our small residential house that we're going to start. Before we start, what we do is go into Classroom, so I'll just minimize that. So on Classroom, what I've done is I've given you two files to download. The first is the plan of the house. So this is the plan of the house we're going to be doing. It's got some key dimensions on it that we'll be following, just to keep everyone as similar as possible, so you can follow me along. So this one is a downloading file, it's a PDF file. So you can download that one, and under in the introduction to Revit, you should see a Revit file as well. So if you download this Revit file, this is essentially so if you click on that, and then the download is up here or download there. So if you download that, it'll go into your computer. This is essentially a file I've created to simplify this delivery, just to get used to some of the tools within Revit. It strips back a lot of the things as well, so that it doesn't confuse anyone. So this is one we'll start with. You can start with other templates as well, but this one, it makes it a bit more easier. It takes a lot of the complicated stuff out of it, in terms of selections for different things. So if I go into open Revit, so there's Revit, so you can open file, so open. So I've got mine in my downloads folders on my computer, downloads. It's not in there. I'll just download it for you 2 seconds. Download. Okay, so that's downloaded. So if I go open my computer, downloads, and Revit start, if you open that, okay, so here you won't see anything initially because there's nothing being modeled, obviously. But if I click on ground floor, you'll see nothing, and then on the elevations, it's all been set up for you. So everything's been set up for you to start from for this tutorial. So if I go ground floor, so one thing I would do here is save as first, so at least then it starts off the process for saving and backing up. So file, save as, project, and then you can rename it what you want. So I'll rename mine start T3. So if I know where I'm starting, so this is what I'm working on just now. So you save it where you want it, and make sure you save it as a project. At least then that starts off. So now all the backups will follow along with that now. Okay, so we're going to do start modeling here. Okay, so we're going to start modeling external walls. As I mentioned before, we are using this as our guide. So I'll just put that on the screen for 2 seconds there. So it's 4850 by 8000. Notice where the dimensions are taken from. So these dimensions are taken from the internal walls and the surfaces of the internal walls. So that's quite important, and you'll find out later why that's important when you're modeling, because you can set your modeling walls to start drawing from the inside to inside walls. So that's quite important to remember. I'll just put this to my second screen, but if you have it either printed or if you have it on your screen behind somewhere, just to refer back to it where you need to, or take a sketch of it, that's fine. So I'm just going to put mine back on my second screen so I can keep an eye on it. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to create a wall. So architecture wall. Just click the button. So to set up this in terms of properties, first thing we do is we set the height. So so the height of the wall, on this green line, you've got some properties that you can select similar to here. So we're going to set the height to roof level. So we want our external walls to go from ground level or foundation level all the way up to the roof level. So we set that to roof. Notice that these have been set for you for now. In the next advanced tutorials, I will show you how to set levels up for yourself. For this one, I'll just set them up for you just to make this a lot more simpler. Another thing here, you can set the location line. So location line is where you want to draw your wall, okay? you can either draw your walls from center line, from surface interior or surface exterior, different locations. Now, center line will be drawn in the center of a wall. So if I do this as this example, if I draw architectural wall center line, if I draw that, it's drawing right on the center of that wall. Okay, so everything will be from that central point of that wall. Okay. The difference between the next one is exterior finish face or interior finish face. Okay, that's quite important because I mentioned to you before, the example I've given you, this is all from the finished faces. Okay, so these dimensions are from that plasterboard finish to that plasterboard finish, so they're from finished faces. So that's where this tool comes in handy, because then it can meet your dimensions for what you need. So if I go to finish face interior, it means it will draw from that finish face there. So that's the finish face. If that was plasterboard, it would be the plasterboard face of that wall. Okay, so that finishes there to there. The next tool that you with walls is worth doing, looking at, is chain. So chain I usually keep ticked on, but what chain means is when you're drawing, it doesn't stop. It creates a chain of walls until the point you finish, in which case you've got to click escape, and that escape twice gets out of the tool. So you can keep drawing and not have to stop and start every time you need to draw a wall. The alternative is, if I just delete all that, alternative is obviously if you take chain off, this is what happens. So you create a wall, it'll stop, and then you've got to start again, create the next wall, it'll stop, next wall, it'll stop, and then next wall will stop. So it's just a faster way of doing it. I personally have it on all the time, and then just click escape when I don't need it. Obviously, there's other tools like offset in the radius, and that we're not going to look at those just now, but there's other options you can set as well. In terms of our properties panel, so what we want to use for our walls, if I zoom out here, is an external 300 wall. Now in Revit, it does come with defaults of different wall types, so brick and block, cladded systems, and that kind of stuff. You can make your own as well. But for this tutorial and for this template file I've given you, I've simplified it to simple wall components and window components and roof components. Note that in the actual Revit templates I'm going to show you in the more advanced tutorials that we do for the commercial building, you will have options for brick and block cladded systems, and I will also show you how to create your own or modify these to create your own versions of them as well. So this is simplified within Revit for this example only. So we're going to click concept 300 because the typical external wall is going to be a 300mm wall. Our base constraint, we want that to be ground floor because we want the wall to start at ground floor, and we want to finish top floor, which we've already set. In terms of base, we want the wall to extend into the ground, below the ground, because we want foundation walls. So if I put down minus 750, that means the wall is going to go below the ground level. So if you imagine this is the ground level, this is the ground, it's going to go below 750, and then it's going to place the foundation, that's the foundation wall under the ground. Okay, so we want the offset to be minus that. So you can specify minus or plus that level. So if this is ground, minus or plus, so we want minus 750 for our foundation walls. And then we can start modeling. So I'm going to start modeling on this screen here. So if you can start within these black markers, it will help because that's all set up for your elevations and all that kind of stuff. So if you start within these black markers, that makes it a lot easier later on. So if you start modeling, so if I go architecture wall, start there. So again, a couple of things here. When you're drawing, you'll see these blue dimensions come up. They're temporary dimensions. You can use that to help you. So if I want to make my wall, for example, I want to make it 4850, you can use that to help you. It takes a bit longer, but it can be done. Again, zoom in, it can be done because you can see 4850 is there. Again, if I go down the way, another way to do it is just type it manually into your keypad. So if I go 8000, you'll see it comes up as 8000 and click enter, and that will create me an internal wall of 8000 there. Again, here I probably don't need to type it in again because what you can use now is your snap guides. So these purple things or pink things that come up on the screen, you'll see that's a cross. There should be a square, and then there's a triangle. There's other ones that come up again. These are snap guides, okay? So these snap guides help you model a lot quicker. So if I go horizontally along here, that will come in, that cross comes in where that point there is exactly the same line as that point there. So that means that point will be exactly the same line as there. In which case I don't need to type anything in. I will just go along until it snaps automatically to that point, and then click, and that will create me a wall in that position. Again, another thing to note is, again, the square is the end point. So square is the end point of that wall. So if I'm trying to finish this wall off or finishing the end of this wall, I would use a square to make sure that wall is exactly at the end. Don't finish it off at that gap there. Don't leave gaps because that's just bad modeling. So try and finish off with the endpoints or in the middle. So that will join the two walls together and create a full wall. Alternatively, if you were trying to find the middle of a wall, you can use a triangle, and that's the midpoint of a wall. Okay, so you can actually click there, and that's the midpoint of a wall or a component. Now here, another thing to note is your mouse, whichever direction you point your mouse, it will model in that. So if you point your mouse in that way and then type in 7,000, it's going to give you a wall that is 7,000, but in that angle. Okay, so be careful when you are modeling. So if I undo that, when you are modeling, that you do follow straight lines. So the guide should help you, and it automatically should snap to being in straight lines. But just be wary that if you're slightly off that line, it will model that wall at a slight angle. Okay, so the dash lines help you stay in straight lines. So if I just model that there, and then click escape, and that finishes that model off in terms of the 4 external walls. So if I click that external wall there, you can see here you can go back at any point, and what you'll find is these temporary dimensions come up again. So if you didn't get it right the first time, you can go in and change these manually. So I can go in here, I can change these to 5,000 if I want, and that obviously changes that point there to that point to 5,000. We'll go back to 8,000 or 8 meters. Again, you can be, if you work in meters, you can do the same. So you can do 5m, and that will change it as well. Everything in Revit's in millimeters, but it does work with using that little shortcut as well. So 8m makes it 8 meters. Again, if you click on this wall, it will give you the dimension to there. These little markers indicate where the dimensions are taken from. You can't move them, which I'll show you later how that's done. But these markers tell you that wall there is taken from this line to that line, which is what we need, because that lines itself up with our with what we need for that one. Okay, so that should be 4850. Sorry, 4850. And that will change that. Okay, so the 4850 by 8 meters is our building footprint for the external walls. Now if you click escape, and that gets rid of all any tool that you're in. So anytime you want to get out of escape and get back to being without any tools or anything, just click escape a couple of times. That just resets all the tools. Now what we want to do is we just want to check what we've done. So if you go to 3D views, open up 3D views in your project browser, double click on 3D, and now you've got your external wall. So you can orbit. So again, shift and hold down the middle scroll wheel, and that orbits your objects. Zoom in so you can see that now. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to create some foundations for our wall. Remember what we said before? We started off at ground floor and we extended our walls below ground floor by 750. We'll just check that we did that. Yep, so base offset at 750. So now we can add in our foundations. So we're going to add some strip foundations in around each of the walls. So we can, so it looks like foundations. So okay. So what we'll do is if you go to structure, so this is really the only time we're going to go to structure is to create foundations. So we're going to go to structure. Under the foundations panel, we're going to go wall foundations. That's typical for a slab, strip foundation. Click on that. If you click on a wall, it will add it in. Alternatively, a couple other ways you can select walls is you can highlight the wall or hover over the wall using the tab button on your keyboard. So that should be just above your caps lock. Don't click anything, just tap it a couple of times, and that cycles through the selection, so you can actually select all the walls at the same time. So that just clicking through them. And alternatively, you can select one wall and type in S and A on your keyboard. So SA, and that selects all the walls. Okay, that's two ways of selecting the same component if you want. And then if you go structure, foundation wall, and then you can put them all in. So I'll put all of them in there. So again, if I orbit down, you can see the foundations have been put in. Okay, so that's how you add in some foundation. They're really just there for visuals just now. Obviously, in structural engineering, they can do a lot more with this kind of structural panel tools that they have. They can import it into obviously other structural software plugins. But for this, we're just doing an architectural model, so we just want the visuals of what a foundation looks like. So that's as much as we need to know for foundations. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is we're going to add in the ground floor. So to do that, if you go to double click on ground floor, so we're going to add in a slab for the ground floor, and so that we can put our internal walls onto. So ground floor, if you go to architecture, again, architecture floor. Now, the floor tool is slightly different from the other tools. Here, we've got a tool that you have to sketch out the floor, the shape of the floor, and then it will create a floor based on that shape. Okay, so you've got to actually draw a floor, the shape of the floor, and then it will create a floor. Unlike the wall tool, which creates a wall at the same time as modeling, this one has another step in the process. Okay, so you've got to actually draw out the shape of your floor. In most cases, it's rectangular, but in other cases, it can be different, or you can modify them as well. So with this, you'll see another set of draw tools come up. So you've got line, you've got rectangle, you've got like arcs and that kind of circles and that kind of stuff. Most of the time, it's line or rectangles. Another good tool to use is what's called pick walls. So we'll come on to this in a bit, but we could essentially create this floor inside the walls by using the rectangle tool. The purple lines is what indicates you're sketching, so that's a sketch of your floor that you're trying to create. Your floor should be on the inside wall. If it's not, if I click escape, if it's not, if you select all of them, you can adjust it later. Sorry, I'll leave that bit there. But you can create a rectangle as a full rectangle. I click Control Z to undo that. So Control Z is undo, like any other software that you have. You can use lines, so you can create using lines. So again, you can just do a simple line diagram. So you can actually do any shape that you want, and that will create. Select Control Z, all that. Go back to the start. So you can create that. Now, one key thing to note on this one is that purple line has to be a clean line. What I mean by that is there can't be any gaps in that line. There can't be any overlaps, or you get some kind of error. So sometimes once you do that, you'll get an error saying there's a gap or there's an overlap down here, in which case it will probably highlight where that is, and you have to fix it, okay? In which case you would have to select it. So if I do a couple here, you would have to go in, select that line, either change it, like drag the little things, the little circles at the end of it to change it to make sure that it finishes at the end points, so there's no gap, or if there is overlaps, to make sure that there's no overlaps. So you need to change it manually before it'll let you finish that and create that floor. Okay, so you must have a closed loop of some sort, and there must be a clean closed loop as well. I'll Control Z these ones. Now the tool I use, that probably for this instance, is what's called pick walls. So what this does is essentially picks walls, and it will create a purple line or the sketch line onto that wall. So if you've got a floor plate or a series of walls put together, it will create that purple line or the edge of that floor against those walls. Okay, so you can just click on every wall, and it will actually create the purple line onto that wall. Okay, these little two arrows help you to mirror things. So for example, this is on the internal wall, which is what we want. But if it doesn't come in like this, it might come in like this, in which case don't delete it. If it's on the outer face of the wall, just click that button and it should attach itself onto the inner face of that wall. Okay, and then once you've done all that, once you're happy with your sketch, what you need to do is make sure you tick that button, the green button, and what that does is tells Revit, I've done my sketch, this is the shape I want, create me a floor on that shape. Okay, again here you can specify different floor types as well. For this I've just given you one type of floor type, but in the later on we will look at other floor types, so you can specify different floor types as well, so you can tell it to create a floor to a certain specification. But for this we've just got one type of floor type, which is fine. So we tick it, and then yes to this, this message quiz, what you want to do is overlap the walls and floors together, and then that's created the floor. So check that. If you go back to your 3D, double click, and then now you see we've got a floor. So now you should have created foundations, external walls, and a floor. Okay, so that's your first tutorial on how you set up the basic shell of your building.